Hi, this is Garrett with CSI, and today we're going to show you the steps to square your quarter midget. So currently we have our car set up in setup blocks. I use the Tanner setup block. There's several people that make them. Prior to getting to this point, we wanted to set the ride height in the car. So we would rough in our ride height, get our ride height set, and then take the hubs off front and rear and set the car in the setup blocks to start the squaring procedure. So the first step is going to be to set the rear end and the front end side to side in the car. Different manufacturers are going to have different recommendations. Some will give you a specific eye-to-eye measurement on your panhards. Some will tell you where they want the left rear birdcage to sit. On our specific application here with the Sherman car, we put the center of the left rear shock eye on the center of the chassis rail there. So you want to set the side to side, front to rear, and that would be your first step to squaring the car. So the second thing I like to do is make sure we get our bird cages timed, and that would be on your left rear and your right rear. Different manufacturers will have different points to measure from. On this particular, we have a nice flat here where the rear panhard picks up, and we also have a flat where the shock picks up. So that's where we will square them to 90 degrees. So the third step, after we have the side to side set on the front and rear axle and the left rear and the right rear birdcage timed, is to square the rear axle to the frame rail in the chassis. And so we're going to do that by using a couple of 90-degree squares and a tape measure. One thing that's really important to remember is to take your time, because we're squaring it inside the frame rails here so we can square it to the rear tube. And if you're a 1/16 of an inch out of square here, it's going to be exaggerated by the time you get out to the edge of the wheels. So we want to make sure this is perfectly square, and take your time. It needs to be perfect. So in order to get the car perfectly square, rear axle to the rear frame rail of the chassis, you're probably going to have to adjust these rods. Now we've already timed the bird cages, so we don't want to get them out of time. So what I do is I just take a silver Sharpie. If you have black rods, if you have silver rods, you can use a black Sharpie. Mark the top of the rod, and then you want to adjust them evenly. So if we need to lengthen it, we want to do them evenly, top rod to bottom rod, to not get the birdcage out of time. I always go back and double check to make sure I didn't, but that will get you really darn close. So the fourth and final step is we're going to square the rear axle to the front axle. So now we know the rear end is square to the chassis, and we want to square the front axle to the rear axle. And we're going to do that by just simply measuring our wheelbase in the squaring blocks. And so whatever measurement we get on the right side, we're going to want to adjust the left side to match. So one thing that's going to be really important is to make sure your tape measure is as straight as possible, because if it's out of alignment, we're going to get a longer measurement than we should. So make sure it is as straight as possible.